Vallow versus Tammy Daybell. We've got additional testimony from Officer Hart this morning on direct. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping issues. The court has received the juror affirmations. I wanted to confirm, have all 18 jurors returned today?
Yes, sir.
All right. So we've got all 18 jurors with all their juror affirmations signed since the weekend. Also, I had a brief sidebar with counsel as we started regarding defendant's Exhibit 6, which has been admitted, and upon further consideration, I think will require the removal of some commentary in there. I think the parties have all agreed. So as we get to that exhibit, I think it'll need to be either amended or substituted, and we'll work on that issue. But we'll try to keep that as clear as we can in the record once that exhibit's being referenced, and make sure that the exhibit that is submitted to the jurors or published throughout trial to the jurors conforms with previous rulings on that information in the exhibit. So with those issues in mind, is the state going to be ready to proceed with additional direct?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right, will the defense be ready to proceed this morning?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'll note also the prosecutors are here as well as the defendant and the defense counsel. So let's go ahead and have our jurors brought in, please, Mr. Bailiff.
Yes, sir. All right, please. Here's our president count for you, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Please be seated. Okay, we are on the record on case CR 22-21-1623. This is Monday morning after the weekend break. The court has confirmed that all jurors have returned and are properly seated and present. I'll also note the court received the juror affirmation from all 18 of the jurors. So thank you again for following the court's continuing admonishment and instruction during the breaks. We're ready to continue with direct examination this morning. I'll note the state is here present. Prosecutors Wood and Blake, Mr. Wixom and Miss Beatty, as well as Mr. Pryor here with the defendant, Mr. Daybell. Officer Hart was on direct examination as we broke for the weekend, and I believe the state has additional direct. Is that correct, Miss Blake?
That is correct, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right. If you'd go ahead and call your witness, then we'll have him return to the stand.
The state will call Agent Hart.
All right, thank you. Agent Hart, you are still under oath for purposes of your testimony. That oath was given last week. In addition, I'll just inquire over the weekend, or since you were on the stand, have you reviewed any of this trial that's been is available online and has been live streamed? Have you reviewed any of the testimony of the trial?
No, Your Honor.
All right. With that then, Ms. Blake, you can continue on your direct.
Thank you, Your Honor. And I do have a modified slide, a courtesy copy for the court and one for Your Honor as well, or one for the court and one for Your Honor. Defense has already been provided one.
clear, the identifier information's been redacted on what's going to be published.
Correct, Your Honor.
Yes, you may publish.
Agent Hart, we were here last Friday and we had been talking about some texts exchanged regarding Charles' death. Do you recall that?
I do.
And do you recall talking about the beneficiary in relation to Charles' death?
Yes, there had been a series of text messages between Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell that indicated Lori Vallow had found out that her husband, Charles Vallow, had changed the beneficiary of his life insurance policy.
And the images on this slide, is that what we're seeing here?
Well, previously there were text messages, and then approximately 2 weeks, 10 days later, Lori Vallow sent 2 MMS messages to Chad Daybell on July 28th of 2019. The one on the left is the original life insurance policy that shows Lori Vallow, his spouse, as the beneficiary to receive 100% of the proceeds of that policy. And this one over here shows the change in beneficiary to Ella K. Woodcock and the date that that was done.
And do you know who Ella K. Woodcock is in relation to Charles Vallow?
It's his sister.
And do you know who she is in relation to JJ Vallow?
She would be JJ's grandmother.
And again, these messages were sent to Chad Daybell.
By Lori Vallow, correct.
And if we go to the next slide, I'm going to pause here and allow the jurors to read. And Agent Hart, when we look at these messages, we talked before, there were additional messages in the iCloud account. Is that correct?
There are thousands of text messages in the iClouds, yes.
And with these particular messages, were there some preceding messages in relation to these?
Chronologically, yes, there were.
And when we're looking at these messages, do you know who the Mel is that's being referred to?
Yes, that's Melanie Boudreau, Lori Vallow's niece.
And what was it about these particular messages that caught your attention?
What caught my attention was the conflict that existed between Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell as it relates to their relationship. At this point, Charles Vallow has been dead for almost a month, and Lori Vallow wants her and Melanie Boudreau to travel to Rexburg, Idaho to spend time with Chad Daybell. Chad Daybell is, of course, still married to Tammy Daybell, and so that
It's sustained.
Boudreau and Lori were wanting to go to Rexburg to visit Chad.
correct.
And can you read the date on these messages into the record?
The date of this text string is August 7th of 2019.
Or into the next day?
Correct, August 8th of 2019.
During this time, do you know if Tammy Daybell was still alive?
She was.
So in this context, it appears that Lori's telling Melanie, we just had a big fight. Do you know who that's in reference to?
That's in reference to Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell.
And at this time, Charles has been dead for not quite a month.
Correct.
What else about these stood out to you?
There's a conflict between Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell regarding,
I think there's inadequate foundation at that point. Mr. Pryor, moving forward on your objections, please use the microphone. Go ahead, Ms. Blake.
Agent Hart, again, you've talked about you went through thousands of messages in this iCloud account, or that there were thousands of messages, correct?
yes,
Were there some messages preceding this indicating what Chad's plans were during this time?
yes.
And what did those messages indicate?
Chad Daybell had a,
All right, again, into the microphone, please, Mr. Pryor, or maybe your mic's not on today, but okay, could we get that checked, please, to make sure the microphone is functioning at defense table?
So if I remember, this is 6. This is 30.
Okay, apologies. Ms. Blake, would you ask another question? I'll defer ruling on that objection. Go ahead.
Agent Hart, did you review messages that indicated what Chad's plans were during this time frame?
yes, it's a scheduling conflict. Lori Vallow wanted to visit Chad Daybell.
Judge, I'm gonna object. It's unresponsive.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Well, I'll sustain the objection because the answer was what Chad's plan, the question was what were Chad's plans, and the answer was what Lori Vallow wanted. I think that's outside the scope of the question and the foundation that's been laid. So it's non-responsive.
You determined that Chad Daybell had different plans during this time?
Judge, objection, that's leading.
Your Honor, he's already answered that.
Overruled.
Yes, he had a family vacation planned.
So in reference to the big fight, based on your investigation, were you able to determine what this text thread was about?
Yes,
And what did you determine the fight to be about?
Lori Vallow's trip, which conflicted with Chad Daybell's family vacation.
And when we look at those last 3 messages, did anything about those catch your attention?
From the content of the iCloud, this was the first big fight they had had. And it appeared that they were at odds with one another. And Chad Daybell's comments was that his heart was crushed and he would never stop loving her.
And if we go to the next slide, again, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read. And Agent Hart, can you indicate the date of these text messages?
Yes, it's towards the end of the day on August 8th of 2019.
Is this a continuation from the conversation we saw on the previous slide?
Correct.
In looking at this, was there something that stood out to you?
Yes.
And what was that?
If you look at the date and the time, you can see that Lori Vallow has ceased to communicate with Chad Daybell for approximately a day. And this lengthy text, line 1300, is a very clear example of how Chad Daybell used his supposed visionary powers to manipulate Lori Vallow.
Judge, I'm going to object for speculation.
And in this, sorry, let me back up. In that first message as well from Chad to Lori, can you read the second sentence of that?
Saddest day of my life.
And again, you indicated Lori had quit communicating with him after the previous message that we saw.
That's correct. So there had been no communication from Lori Vallow to Chad Daybell on August 8th of 2019.
And after Chad sends that lengthy text, it appears Lori resumes communication. Is that correct?
Yes,
And can you read into the record what she said?
I love you.
And then Chad responds just,
Thank you, my love. I will get things restored.
so in that lengthy one, he indicated that he may not be able to protect her anymore.
Correct. Grandpa Keith is Lori's deceased grandfather. So Chad Daybell is indicating to Lori Vallow that he is unable to protect her and that the angels are angry that she is ignoring him. And so he is trying to get her to respond due to those indication of what's happening spiritually.
And then once she does respond, Chad will get things restored.
That's what he indicates, yes.
Then if we move to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read. And will you indicate the date this message was sent?
This is August 10th of 2019.
And what about this particular message stood out to you?
Well, I think this is an example of how Lori Vallow manipulates Chad Daybell.
And this image was sent along with the surprises or waiting text. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And again, on August 10th, is Tammy Daybell still alive?
Yes.
Moving to the next slide, and again, I'll pause to allow the jurors to read. And if you could read into the record the date these messages were sent.
These are August 10th of 2019.
So these would have been sent after that image that we saw in the previous slide.
Correct.
What, if anything, about these caught your attention?
There had been several messages preceding these two messages indicating their ability to connect spiritually, to enter into portals, to be together outside the physical realm. What stood out to me about these two messages is that both Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell understand that's not real and it's not true. Lori Vallow says, I wish you were really here to experience this with me. And again, saying, I wish I could wake up and kiss your sweet, tender lips for real. So to me, that indicated an understanding between being together truly in the physical realm in which we live versus this alleged ability to portal and be with one another spiritually.
And if we go to the next slide, again, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read. Can you indicate the date these messages were sent into the record?
Yes, this is August 11th of 2019.
And what about these particular messages caught your attention?
These 4 messages are the beginning of a text string that occupies this slide and the next 5 slides. And it's a lengthy back and forth between Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow regarding a vacation that Chad Daybell is going on with his wife, Tammy Daybell, and other relatives.
And in relation to that trip, can you read the last sentence of that first text?
Partly why I am so sad is my Boise trip has turned into a trip with extended family. Not happy about it.
And then if we move down to that third message, was there something about that that caught your attention?
Well, these are Chad Daybell's own words. He says, I can't take much more, so trapped. So it's an indication of how he's feeling as it relates to his current situation as it existed on August 11th of 2019.
We move to the next slide and I'll pause to allow the jurors to read. And Agent Hart, you indicated this is a continuation from the previous slide. Is that correct?
Yes.
What about these messages caught your attention?
First of all, the date caught my attention. This is 1 month to the day after Charles Vallow had been killed, and approximately 10 months into the relationship between Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell. Subsequent to Charles Vallow's death, the pressure being put by Lori Vallow on Chad Daybell for them to be together increased significantly. And so you see in these messages that Lori Vallow is asking, is that what he wants, for me to sit around waiting for you endlessly and you miserably wasting time? It doesn't feel right. And so these messages are a good indication of their thoughts as it relates to their ability to be together in the current circumstances that they find on that date.
And in that first message, Chad refers to it as torture.
Referring to the 2 days he's going to spend with his family as torture, yes,
And you indicated Charles Vallow's been dead for about a month, correct?
exactly 1 month.
But Tammy's still alive.
Yes, she is.
And moving to the next slide, again, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read. And Agent Hart, you indicated this is also a continuation from the previous 2 slides. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
When you look at these particular messages, what stood out to you?
Again, it's a clear communication between Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell regarding the status of their relationship and Lori Vallow's desire to be together overtly with Chad Daybell.
And when we look at the last message, the response from Chad to Lori, can you read that into the record?
Yes. Oh, honey, that is so crushing. I feel so destroyed inside. You know, my love for you is deep and real. I want change. I'm constantly begging for change. I want you. Nothing else matters. But I am hindering your life and you deserve better. I love you so intensely.
And at this point in time, again, Charles died 1 month ago, correct?
Yes,
But Tammy's still alive.
yes.
And moving to the next slide, again, I'll pause to allow the jurors to read. Agent Hart, on that previous slide, we'd seen that Chad was begging for change so he could be with Lori. Is that correct?
Yes.
What would need to change so he and Lori could be together?
Judge, objection calls for speculation.
Sustain.
Agent Hart, when we look at this slide, is it a continuation from the last several slides?
Yes,
And it's still on August 11th of 2019.
that's correct.
What about these messages stood out to you?
This demonstrates Lori Vallow's impatience for this plan that I've testified to previously about the life they want to live, where they want to live it, and their plans to be together and conduct missions together. And so Lori wants that to happen. And that can't happen while Tammy Daybell is still married to Chad Vallow, or excuse me, to Chad Daybell.
And again, to remind the jurors, in these messages, did you ever see any indication that Chad was intending to divorce Tammy?
Never.
Did you ever see any indication that Chad was intending to separate from Tammy?
No.
If we go to the next slide, again, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read it. And again, Agent Hart, this is a continuation from the previous slides, is that correct?
It is.
What about these particular messages stood out to you?
Previously, on August 8th of 2019, when this conflict about Chad Daybell's family vacation came up, we saw the text message about Grandpa Keith and that the Angels were angry that Lori Vallow was ignoring Chad Daybell. The middle line of this text is a reference to that exchange that occurred 3 days previously, where Lori Vallow is now asking Chad Daybell, are you going to threaten me that I'm unprotected for putting Chad Daybell aside? And his response is absolutely not. I'm so upset at the circumstances. I'm demanding they protect you more than ever. So this was a tie back to the August 8th conversation with Chad Daybell.
And again, an indication that Chad Daybell can provide some form of protection.
Correct.
And moving to the next slide, I'm going to pause to allow the jurors to read. And Agent Hart, is this also a continuation from the previous slides?
Correct. This is the final slide for this text string.
And with this one, if we break it down a little bit, looking specifically at that second text from Chad to Lori, are there certain things in that text that stood out to you?
Absolutely.
What were those?
The first is, it's mainly the second sentence. We are surrounded by telestial relatives that are simply obstacles.
Do you know what the reference to celestial relatives would be in relation to? Or actually, let me back up. Through your investigation, did you learn or determine what celestial relatives would be referencing?
Yes.
What did you learn that to be?
The word telestial derives from the LDS faith. It is the lowest level or degree of glory or heaven. And then there are levels above that. So it's a reference to the lowest level of heaven as it's perceived.
And the specific word next to that is relatives.
Yes.
And these celestial relatives are being described as simply obstacles.
Correct.
And then what did Chad say regarding that? What's that next sentence, if you could read it into the record?
I'm so sick of it! Exclamation point.
And there's a response from Lori, but then looking down to the last message from Chad back to Lori, anything about that one that stood out to you?
There's a couple of things that stood out in that last sentence. Yes.
And could we go through those one by one?
Yes.
What is the first one?
Chad Daybell states very clearly what his greatest desire is. I want to be with you. That is my greatest hope and dream.
And again, during this time, Tammy Daybell's still alive?
She is.
What else about this message stood out to you?
The last sentence is telling in my mind. I would happily join you tomorrow if it felt like heaven would not strike us down.
Your Honor, I have no additional questions at this time.
All right, thank you, Ms. Blake. Counsel, in reference to cross-examination and potential exhibit, I wanted to update counsel on that outside the presence of the jurors. So let's take a brief sidebar at this moment. All right, we're back on the record after a sidebar with council. It's a little earlier than we would normally do this, but what we're going to do is take our mid-morning break at this time in order to get some exhibits properly before the jury, before cross-examination, which will take a few moments to allow the jurors to take a break. I'll go on the record with counsel before we bring the jurors back in at the end of the break to make any other additional evidentiary rulings that would occur outside the presence of the jurors. And then once we've concluded that, we should have the morning set up for continued cross-examination and evidence until we get to lunch. So with that in mind, let's take our mid-morning break at this time.
All right, please.
I'm trying to remember the name of the term for people who are into criminals. Let's Google that real quick here. Okay.
All right, counsel, just let me know when you want to conclude the break when we have these exhibits ready.
Folks, go ahead and head out now. Please grab all of them.
Okay, I was right. Hybristophilia. I'm not sure where they get hybristo from, but that's the name of it. Okay, let's see. I was looking at a video of Mike King last night, and he had some really interesting things to say in his opening. He's an expert on cults here in Utah, dealt extensively with the FLDS church down in the Hillsdale area. So let's see. Let me just pull up that. Okay, here we go. Let me just get this set up.
Hey, welcome to Profiling Evil, everyone, and thank you for coming on board. And please hit the like and subscribe button so that you get all of our videos as we release them. Now, this is a pretty interesting week that we're facing as we move into another week of testimony in the Chad Daybell murder trial. I want to start off by talking about the facts in the case that support that Chad Daybell was twisting facts and familiar scripture to manipulate his followers, including his new twisted lover, Lori Vallow, twisting him into doing things that he commanded. I spoke about it on Court TV, and I talked about some of the tactics and why they support the prosecution's claim that Chad Daybell was truly in charge. Like other cult leaders, Daybell appears to have cherry-picked information that supports his perversions and his behaviors, completely ignoring moral warnings that everything he was doing was wrong. He simply dismissed anything that contradicted what he really wanted to do. You know, things like justifying an affair that he was having with Lori Vallow while he's still married to Tammy. Together, these two adulterers twisted reality into their own skewed perspectives, convincing their followers that they'd been married in previous lives, hundreds of years ago, and that they already had been judged by the God that they worshiped, and they could no longer face penalties for doing what other people might consider evil, illegal, wrong. By distorting scripture and previously held mainstream religious beliefs, they took what some people interpreted to be the truth, something in scripture that was familiar, and they exaggerated it and misinterpreted it for their own twisted fantasies. They took commonly accepted scripture out of context, focusing on specific words that fit the narrative that they had and that they were promoting. In fact, they created their own narratives, these compelling stories around their own beliefs. And according to testimony that's now coming out in the trial, and that we heard in Lori Daybell's trial, they weave together real events with fictional or exaggerated elements, all to make it appear that they were somehow inspired and receiving revelation. All this reinforced their self perceived authority, and it justified their actions to their followers. These were followers who didn't have the courage to stand up against them and say, "This is wrong." But this courtroom that we're in now is standing up, and it's showing how they isolated their followers from outside sources of information and from anyone who dissented in opinion. But here's the crazy part: their followers were actually in a position to question and frankly think about things, yet they chose not to. They had access to the internet. They had safety nets of non-cult members. This is much different than most cults that we talk about, where they're isolated from the internet and everything else. They had all that at their fingertips, yet they chose to stick around, thinking that they were part of some elite group of individuals that had a secret that nobody else should know about. Well, in its own wacky way, it was sort of a sense of pride to those people who were following Chad and Lori Daybell. And now they're paying the price. Can you imagine how embarrassing it is now for them to sit on the stand and acknowledge what they believed? This preferred position of inside knowledge put them all in an us versus them mindset. And that's how Chad and Lori maintained control. They reportedly and quite successfully convinced members of their cult to view the outside world as hostile or dangerous. They distrusted anyone who didn't share their beliefs, and this reinforced the group's cohesiveness while discouraging followers from critically examining information that would have contradicted the group's ideology. Again, this is how cults work, and it's important to think about these. Now, I believe there was a substantial amount of fear and intimidation exerted on those cult members from Chad and Lori. And I think we're witnessing a little example of that when we were able to listen in on the conversation that Melanie Gibb had when she confronted Chad and Lori over the phone while they were in Hawaii on their little trip away from town. You remember, Lori started talking down to Gibb, questioning her loyalty and frankly her worthiness to be accounted among their loyal followers. We saw another great example of this when that person who was in charge of that end of days website that Chad was associated with had to step up and tell everyone that he had spoken with Chad and felt like Chad was being framed by law enforcement and angry extended family members, only to retract that when the actual arrests occurred and more information started coming out. This emotional manipulation exhibited by Chad and Lori Daybell to their followers seems really evident as we listen to the stories, the news reports, and testimony that's coming out in this trial. Cult members were punished, if not ostracized, when they disagreed with the power couple. There was a fear of speaking out against them, and if they agreed with them, there was this overabundance of love bombing when they found that they had people complying with them. And by employing these tactics, Chad and Lori Daybell were able to create an environment where their followers were conditioned to accept their beliefs without question, making it much easier for Chad and Lori to twist the facts to suit their own agenda. Let's catch my comments on Court TV about this topic.
Mike King, Chad was using religion, right? Using all these religious references, you know, and then taking them, twisting them, turning them so he could reel her in.
Yes, and this is one of the tactics that's used by these cult leaders, Vinny, is to take something that's familiar, something that has previously proven that, yes, this is something I can believe in. It comes from scripture, or it comes from some great person in the world that shared some experience. But they take something that's familiar and they twist it and they turn it, and then they add a little bit of their own philosophy. And they always introduce this idea that because I'm a God and I have this additional light and knowledge, or this special dispensation because I'm connected with the powers to be up in the universe somewhere, that people buy off on it. And what we find is that oftentimes there are two things. There are either those individuals who are just weak at that very moment, because I'll tell you, these aren't usually dumb people that join cults. These are usually pretty educated or pretty capable people. And cult leaders don't want some project. They want somebody that's going to really add to the system that they're building. Or it's somebody with a like mind. And we're seeing it. And I'm so glad to see Adam and Rex on tonight, because they understand from the long haul some of these ideological beliefs that Lori had that brought her seeking someone like a Chad Daybell. But then all he's got to do, Vinny, is convince her you're something special, and I'm the key that's going to get you where you want to go. And then all of a sudden, just like you said, Adam, fire and fuel come together, and holy cow, set back and watch what happens. The next area that I thought was a really powerful and supportive position for the prosecution's claim that Chad was as involved in running all the affairs of their little cult, the Church of the Firstborn, as Lori was. And it came when Melanie Gibbs spoke about castings. Now, testimony has been very clear that Chad Daybell came up with these designations of who were light spirits and who were dark spirits. And if you remember, those dark spirits were the focus of this segment that we're talking about in the court process. And this testimony clearly stated that Chad Daybell was the one who decided whether people were labeled dark or light. In their own wacky minds, dark spirits were these evil spirits who had signed an agreement with the devil long before this world was created to fight against goodness. Now, this is Daybell's theology, not mine. Daybell taught that these spirits possess the bodies of other people so that they can go about the business of creating anarchy. And as luck would have it for Chad and Lori Daybell, the evil spirits were the ones that were actually calling out their bad adults, stood in the way of Chad and Lori cashing in on big money through life insurance policies, something that the prosecution is focusing: sex, money, and power and control. This notion stems from discussions that are in many mainstream religions where they believe that evil spirits can take over good people's bodies. We see these in exorcisms that are going on in some faiths. This idea that the devil can accomplish his goal of disrupting the world one event at a time by getting inside of good people and taking over their body. Now, generally, an evil spirit that takes over a body is often portrayed as this evil force or entity that comes into the body and exerts control over the person's thoughts, their actions, or their emotions. This devil inside them is opposed to goodness, and it does everything it can to thwart the activities of others, especially good activities. Well, Chad and Lori Daybell somehow convinced their followers that these evil spirits had taken over the bodies of people like Charles Vallow, Lori's husband, or Tammy Daybell, Chad's husband, and of course, the children. And by doing this, they set the stage to get rid of them and keep their adulterous relationship hidden from the world until it could come out and they could share it. Remember Chad's statement about the little blue globe. Well, how convenient was that? The theory by the prosecution is that J.J. Vallow and Tylee were also determined to be possessed in order to justify the couple's desire to continue their fantasy relationship, yet have some money that was coming in through Social Security and other means, life insurance policies, to support their new lavish lifestyle. But then something very critical and important happened. Chad and Lori Daybell pulled other members of their cult into these special casting sessions where they would vicariously perform these exorcisms of the evil spirits. And here's the creepy part. They taught, and perhaps even believed it themselves, who knows, that if they were successful in exorcising these evil spirits, that the person's body would ultimately just die. Catch my comments on Court TV about this situation.
If they could cast the evil spirit out, the body would naturally die.
So if someone was dark or a zombie, they were going to die.
Yes.
Ms. Gibb, you talked about the fact that you participated in castings, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And as part of your participation in castings, you knew the intent of what a casting was used for was to rid the body of evil spirits, correct?
Correct.
But then you just testified with the prosecuting attorney that you also knew that at successful completion of the casting, the human body would die. So you knew that when you were doing this castings, that apparently you were ending the life of a human body. Isn't that correct?
I had no idea what really the result would be.
Mike King, these castings, what are your thoughts about the castings and Melanie Gibb?
Yeah, I thought Pryor did a great job today, kind of reminding the court that Melanie Gibb was involved all the way in everything that was going on, that she may have known more. We don't know if there was an immunity agreement or something else, or if she even has any responsibility, Vinny, but she was deep enough in the organization that she understood what was going on. And these exorcisms, for any lack of a better word, in my opinion, were absolutely crafted perfectly, if in fact it was Chad Daybell who came up with this, like the testimony is, because every time they did it and someone actually died, it showed what a prophet he was. Look at how powerful I am to look into the future. You all are participating in doing this exorcism of the evil spirit that's taken over, and look, they died. We then took a little sidebar out and we talked about the casting that was happening against Tammy Daybell, and the fact that it happened at the same time that someone, we believe now, Alex Cox, took a shot at Tammy Daybell. When that murder attempt failed, Lori Vallow's phone, remember, she wasn't married to Chad yet because Tammy was still alive, answered the phone. It was believed that Alex was on the other end, and he told her that he had failed in his attempt to kill Tammy Daybell. Listen to this response and discussion on Court TV about what was said when he reported that he had failed.
I want to take a listen to testimony from the prior trial of Zulema Pastines, who was married to Alex Cox, Lori's brother. And this is, she's describing what happened on October 9th. This was the day that Tammy Daybell was shot at in her driveway. Now, she wasn't struck by a bullet, but she was shot at in her driveway. And apparently that day, Zulema and Lori were doing a casting on Tammy, right, to get the dark spirits out. And then Lori got a phone call.
What was her attitude and demeanor when she got that phone call?
She was very, very angry, scary angry.
Okay. And now this is the night that Tammy was shot at.
Correct.
Okay. So while she's on the phone, she appears angry and scary angry. Did you hear anything she said?
Yeah, she was using some very derogatory terms such as idiot, moron, and just being very, very angry with whoever she was on the phone with.
After she got off the phone, what did she say to you?
She said, idiot, can't do anything right by himself.
Rex Connor, I believe she was speaking with your nephew, Alex Cox, who made an attempt on Tammy's life unsuccessfully right there as they're doing the casting on her.
I believe that, and I'm glad you're talking about that. Not very many people are. That Alex, the family hitman, and I don't exonerate Alex from any of his actions, but he wasn't very good when he wasn't, as a hitman, when he wasn't with someone else. If his attack on Lori's third husband, Joseph Ryan, was supposed to be a hit, he didn't complete that very well, and there's some stories about that. He didn't do this hit on Tammy very well. He was by himself. He didn't finish the job with Melanie Boudreau's husband, Brandon, thank heavens. Okay. So the murders that he committed were seemingly when other people were with him. But I believe, yes, I believe Lori was talking, if not with him, at least about him, that he had missed the shots on Tammy.
And Adam, what are your thoughts about Lori, your brother, Lori, your sister, calling Alex, your brother, an idiot? Have you ever heard that before growing up?
Well, when you grow up with brothers and sisters, you hear it all the time. Everybody's an idiot. But I do believe that that was, I think, because Charles was already killed. And then Lori was expecting, I guess, Tammy to be killed because of, Chad promised whatever the promise was between Chad and Lori to get rid of their spouses. And then if, Chad and Lori said, hey, Alex, Tammy's going to be home at this time, drive by, this is when she'll be outside, shoot her. I think that's what happened. Alex missed the shot. And Lori was probably mad that he missed because Charles is dead, but then Chad still had Tammy. So I think there was something going on with that.
Yeah. And
Well, as we leave this subject of casting, I want to share a comment or two that I made on Court TV about Tylee Ryan and the idea that she was seeing the writing on the wall.
And Mike, this isn't the only shooting. I mean, you had the Brandon Boudreau shooting as well, which was another missed shot. Thank goodness. In that one, this is complete madness that we're talking about. We're putting hits out on like innocent people, like normal innocent people.
Yeah, could you imagine how frightening? I look at all these people who were labeled dark and what that means in the realities of what evidence is showing. And I keep going back to Tylee, Vinny, and I keep thinking of that one comment where she responds to her mother, I'm not a zombie, Mom. Little JJ may not have understood all of the talk that was going on, may not have understood what the ramifications of being labeled dark and zombie were, but I think Tylee did, and I can't imagine how terrifying it was for that child to know that things are going south for her, let alone Alex, Charles, Tammy, everyone else that's falling in the wake of this horrible mess.
Rex Connor, Adam Cox, Mike King, thank you all so much for joining us on this Friday night. Really, really appreciate it.
Now, another big moment for me personally in the trial was when the spiritual blessing that Chad Daybell gave Alex Cox came up. It focused specifically on something called a patriarchal blessing. And it's a perfect example of how cult leaders take mainstream religious practice or doctrine and twist and pervert it in order to suit their own needs. One of the most powerful lessons that I remember learning during my time investigating ritual crime in the state was the reality or the becoming aware that cult leaders will take familiar words. They will take the traditions that they learned as a child of how to pray or how to perform certain types of rituals like blessing people. They will perform these little cult rituals with the same feigned gestures that they would have used in a legitimate setting. The same symbology and verbiage as found in mainstream religion, and they'll twist it and turn it and use it for their own needs in the cult environment. In effect, calling on their God and using rituals that they learned in their youth or that they witnessed in movies or other places as a way to make it appear that they were doing so with authority. But there's one huge difference. The cult leader twists scripture, methods of prayer, worship techniques, and ideology to fit their twisted and predatory goal, which is simply to gain control and power over their followers. And with this in mind, as we've now learned, I wasn't a bit surprised when Chad Daybell offered a blessing to Alex Cox, where he acted like he was speaking for the God that they all believed in. He used that blessing as a method to mold Alex's mindset, mold it to the point that he would do whatever came out in that blessing, believing he was actually receiving some counsel or advice from the God he believed in through a man that he believed was a prophet of that God.
Chad Daybell, it is November 24th, 2019, it's Sunday afternoon, 5:15 p.m. We're going to give Alex Lamar Cox a patriarchal blessing.
Alexander Lamar.
Alexander Lamar Cox, on this special day, I lay my hands upon your head to give you a patriarchal blessing. As part of the member of the Church of the Firstborn, have earned the privilege to be a member of. I do so by the power of the Melchizedek and in the name of Jesus Christ, our Savior, who has authorized this blessing. It is grateful that you're receiving it as you move forward in your life. You are a member of the House of Israel, of the 12 tribes, and you are a descendant of Joseph through the tribe of Ephraim, which grants you many blessings, particularly of spreading the gospel in these latter days and protecting and preserving those who seek to learn the truth. And that has been your mission on this earth, and it will now expand into ways that we will discuss further in the blessing. I want to begin by opening up the portals of time and going back to your previous creations in which you've lived. I see you on the third creation as a valiant warrior fighting for truth and righteousness, always seeking to do what is right. Then you progressed and were selected by the Savior himself to be part of the fourth creation. Great warriors were needed in that creation. Powerful goddesses were needed to be protected, and you were selected to help protect your sister. And you helped her in numerous probations as a defender. You have a special bond even from the premortal world. You connected there And as she grew in power, you were right there beside her, always with a humble heart. You both always were so humble. So as this fifth creation began, after you had been exalted in the fourth creation, when you could have gone on to exaltation with Holly, resurrected being, you accepted the Savior's invitation one more time to come to this mortal realm, to condescend as a God. You help us. You have already assisted us in ways that can never be repaid. And you will continue to do so as you move forward in this life. You were born into a family that needed you desperately, with a set of parents who spoke of the gospel with their mouths, yet did not live it. And once again, you were reunited with a sister who needed you to survive such an environment. In no way was it a reflection on either one of you that you lived in that moment. You were put there to help each other persevere. But the lessons you had to learn in your youth have now made you both strong, powerful servants of the Lord that would not have occurred in a traditional LDS home. You had to go to great depths to achieve tremendous heights. And the fruits of those trials are beginning to be demonstrated. You were granted to be a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and that was a strength to you. You learned about your Savior and grew closer to Him, and rekindled in some ways the connections you've always had with Him. And through adulthood, you have refined yourself. And I just want you to know that at this time, the Savior is saying unto me, well done. Thy soul is cleansed. All is well. And now you'll begin into your terrestrial phase of this existence, that you'll be a powerful servant. I bless you with that knowledge that you'll now move forward as a true warrior in ways that can be demonstrated through not only physical action, but through spiritual power that is coming to you and will be bestowed upon you. I bless you with the knowledge that through marriage, you'll be united with a partner who will match your powers and complement your strengths. You'll be known throughout the world for your good-heartedness, your willingness to save souls all over the world through portals, and you will begin to gather the souls that come unto Christ. I see you in New Jerusalem, but more importantly, I see you as a messenger of the Lord. Surrounding New Jerusalem will be many small communities where people will come who aren't quite ready to enter those heavenly gates, those terrestrial gates. And one of your missions will be to go among the people and testify as a prophet, that they can make it. You'll share your own experiences of overcoming adversity, and through your example, they will rise up. You will give tremendous blessings to them, raise their vibrations, and be like a brother to many of these fathers who may have had doubts, but through your strength, they will look to you as a hero, and you'll bring entire families that have been sanctified to the gates of New Jerusalem, and they will be allowed in on your word. Will be just one of the many wonderful experiences you'll have. I see you doing that often, but then based on assignments, you might go further into the world. Always serving, always a missionary. And with your companion, you'll communicate with Mother Earth herself. You'll know where to be before natural disasters happen.
They were not yet published to the jurors. They were altered in that the descriptive language within those exhibits has been removed. So the contents are the same. The descriptions are not there any longer. So 6 and 7, as originally submitted, are removed from the record, and these 6 and 7 exhibits will come in now with the proper identifiers and just simply replace what was admitted. So we'll watch for that as things move along, council. I think there's a few other exhibits that are going to require the same treatment that have maybe not yet been admitted, and my staff attorney will assist in identifying those along the way if council hasn't. So I think with that, then we're ready to proceed with those evidentiary issues resolved. Anything further before we move on to cross from the state?
Not from the state, Your Honor. Thank you.
Judge, just that if I could have the original 6 and 7 that were struck and have them returned to me, I would appreciate it, Judge.
Okay, if we do have those, we'll get those out of our court records back to defense counsel, and then we will make a diligent effort before deliberations that whatever of these digital files go in for deliberations are only the correct exhibits that were admitted during trial. So with that, we're ready to bring the jurors back in. Let's have them return, and we'll commence with the defense cross of the witness.
All right,
Extras. Strike out the things on. Stand up.
who's out for the counter for you?
All right, thank you, Mr. Bailiff. Please be seated. All right, we've returned from our mid-morning break. We've sorted out the evidentiary issues we had on the record outside the jury's presence. Jury's returned at this time. Agent Hart remains on the stand, still under oath for testimony. The state concluded direct. So at this time, Mr. Pryor, if you'd like to conduct cross-examination, you can do so.
And permission to approach the podium, Judge.
Yes.
Thank you. Good morning, Agent Hart.
Morning.
Now, would you prefer I refer to you as agent? You're retired FBI agent, is that right?
I am retired. That's correct.
Is it your preference to be called chief deputy or would you prefer agent?
Agent's a little less of a mouthful, so that's fine.
And then I'll take your suggestion and refer to you as agent if that's okay. As part of your investigation, you went over thousands of messages. Would that be fair?
Yes.
Tens of thousands of messages?
Yes.
Okay. Significant amount.
Correct.
And you put together a summary of what you thought were relevant messages, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about who some of these messages were sent to, who received some of these messages. Obviously, you spoke in great detail about messages from Chad Daybell. Is that right?
Correct.
And Lori Vallow.
Yes.
Melanie Gibb.
No, Melanie Boudreau.
Well, did you ever have any that you reviewed from Melanie Gibb?
There are messages between Lori Vallow and Melanie Gibb in the iCloud that I have reviewed. Yes.
Okay, so there were messages that were involved with Melanie Gibb as well, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Did any of these folks use other names in speaking with themselves, referring to others?
Can you clarify? Do you mean that
So,
names other than
nicknames.
themselves?
Nicknames. Lori Vallow use any nicknames?
Yes.
What nicknames did Lori Vallow use?
For others or for herself?
For herself and when others responded to her.
She would be called Lolo. She would be called Lily. Chad Daybell referred to her as Elena. And then there were numerous nicknames for her contacts that she had within the iCloud.
Okay, and then as far as Melanie Gibb, do you recall the nickname that Melanie Gibb used?
For herself?
For herself, yes.
I'm sorry, I don't recall that.
Okay. If I mention the word Phoebe, does that ring a bell?
Phoebe rings a bell, but I couldn't say definitively that that's associated with Melanie Gibb.
Okay. And if I were to show you a text message that referenced Phoebe to Lori Vallow, would that refresh your recollection?
It may.
Okay. We'll get to that in a minute. Other nicknames, other people, Alex Cox, did he have any nicknames?
Al was the most common one.
Okay. Melanie Boudreau?
Mostly Mel.
Okay. Anybody else you can think of?
Lori Vallow referred to Chad Daybell frequently as Bubby, Bubby.
Okay. Anything else?
Not that I would classify as nicknames. There were several occasions where others were assigned names by Chad Daybell, but I wouldn't call those nicknames.
Okay. Now, if I could have Elmo put up, Madam Clerk.
What are we going to put on the Elmo?
Judge, I'm going to ask the officer to go back to
Referencing 183.
183, Judge.
All right. So, and Mr. Pryor's mentioned before, there's a light and zoom feature on that Elmo for clarity. And there's a light there as well somewhere. There's a light switch that gets rid of the shadow. There you go. Thank you.
Wouldn't make it without any help, Judge, I promise you. So I want to start towards the end of what we talked about. And you talked about your analysis of this particular discussion or chain of text messages. And this is from the Lolly Time at iCloud, Lori Vallow, right?
Correct.
And the last line, I want you to read 824 again for me.
Of course. I want to be with you. That is my greatest hope and dream. I would happily join you tomorrow. I don't believe I interpreted it at all during my testimony. I read it into the record on direct.
Okay. Well, I'm a bit curious. I want to be with you. That's Chad responding that he wants to be with Lori Vallow, right?
Correct.
It's my greatest hope and dream. He wants to have a relationship with her, right?
Yes, I mean, they've been in a 10-month relationship at this point, but I think he
Okay.
wants that relationship to be overtly known to everyone.
Okay. And you said a 10-month relationship. So 8/11 of 2019. I go back 10 months and that puts me right to October 31st, give or take a few days. So is it your testimony? You said 10 months. Is it your testimony that that relationship started immediately on October 31st, the first time they met?
Essentially, yes.
Okay. So they were in a physical relationship from the first time they met?
No, I testified that their physical relationship began the second time they met in person, which would have been November 15th through the 17th of 2018.
And your interpretation of what that physical relationship in 2 weeks later was what? What type of physical relationship they have 2 weeks later?
Chad Daybell wrote about it in great detail. They were kissing, fondling each other, in bed with each other, taking each other's clothes off.
Okay. And that, are you referring to the Jack and the Elena story? Is that what you're referring to?
James.
James and Elena, I'm sorry,
Yes.
I said Jack. James and Elena, excuse me. You're talking about the James and Elena story, right?
Correct.
And you know what Chad Daybell does for a living, right?
I do.
He's an author.
Yes.
He writes books about experiences that people have, whether religious or otherwise, right?
Yes.
And with every author, there's a little bit of exaggeration, artistic creativity whenever you're writing books. Would you agree with me?
If it's nonfiction, I would agree with you.
Okay. And you also know that this James and Elena was really a book in the making by Chad Daybell about his relationship with Lori Vallow, right?
I wasn't aware that it's a book in the making. No.
Okay. So this was just him taking doing a literary exercise, just writing about his relationship with Lori Vallow, not for the purpose of doing anything with it, just writing about this and making notes using different names, right?
I believe it's a truthful and accurate story.
Okay. Okay. A truthful and accurate story that you're putting down in writing about a relationship you're having with a woman, right?
Yes,
With some artistic creativity applied to it, correct?
I'll agree.
Okay. Now, did you, as part of your investigation, go back and look at some of Chad Daybell's writings?
We had someone in the investigative group do that. I've had some limited exposure to Chad Daybell's other writings, but I was not the individual who did an extensive analysis of those.
Okay. Are you aware that Chad Daybell made a habit of at least vaguely touching on some of his personal experiences when he wrote books?
It's my understanding that a couple of his books were about his prior experiences in his life.
And one of his books was about his daughter Emma. In fact, the very book mentions the name Emma in the book, doesn't it not?
I couldn't tell you the title of the book, but I believe that's correct.
So it wouldn't have been particularly unusual for him, given his past about writing about his past experiences, to put together a book or a novel about a relationship he was having with Lori Vallow, correct?
Correct. I think the James and Elena story is about his relationship with Lori Vallow.
And it wouldn't be unusual, like in his other books, to maybe provide some artistic creativity as far as the facts are concerned, right?
It would depend on which facts you're talking about.
So what you're saying to me is that if the facts are helpful to the prosecuting attorney, he's not making it up.
Objection, Your Honor. Argumentative. Move to strike.
Sustain.
You don't know which facts are creative in this story that he was writing Lori Vallow, do you?
I know that we were able to vet and verify an extensive number of facts from that story.
Okay.
I couldn't tell you whether the explicit sexual detail is accurate or not, but the other elements are accurate.
Okay. So when we go back to this lolly time that's up on the board here and showing us, the last line is, I would happily join you tomorrow if it felt like heaven would not strike us down. You see that line?
I do.
Okay. And you said you didn't offer any explanation as to what that meant.
On direct, I did not.
Okay. And that was on August 11th of 2019.
That's correct.
And it talks about heaven would strike us down
It
in
does.
regards to the relationship.
Say again.
Well, it's in regards to the relationship, because I will happily join you tomorrow if it felt like heaven would not strike us down. That's what that says, isn't it?
It does.
Okay, so that has nothing to do with murder, does it?
I don't know that I could say entirely that it doesn't.
Okay. Does it have anything to do with the fact that maybe Mr. Daybell felt he couldn't divorce his wife, Tammy?
I don't know whether that's what that's in reference to or not.
Could it have anything to do with the possibility that Chad Daybell, as this so-called visionary who gets these premonitions, wouldn't leave his wife, Tammy, until his premonition came true that she would pass away?
Objection, Your Honor. Misstates the evidence or the prior testimony.
Overruled.
You can answer that, officer.
Again, I don't know what was in Chad Daybell's mind as it relates to why heaven would strike him down if he joined Lori Vallow at that point.
Okay. Tens of thousands of text messages, right?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't see in any of these, and if you have them in the other 10,000 that you went through, show me the one that says, hey, this is Chad. Let's kill the kids.
Objection, Your Honor. Argumentative and tries to put evidence not in fact.
Overruled.
Facts not in evidence.
Well, it's question on cross. It's overruled.
Show me the text. It says, let's kill the kids.
Well, that is argument, Mr. Pryor. If you want to ask if there's a text, that would be different.
Is there a text that says, let's kill the kids?
There are several texts that talk in detail about the deaths of those two children. Yes.
Oh, well, in detail about the deaths and what happened during their deaths, right? Not let's kill the kids, are there?
Wait a minute. What do you mean what happened during their...
What I'm saying is that there's references to Tylee and JJ throughout text messages, correct?
Yes.
Okay. But there is not a text message that says, let's kill the kids, is there?
There are text message in those specific words, no, but certainly alluding to and planning for the deaths of Tylee and JJ, yes.
Okay, and in reference to how they're planning to kill the kids, why don't you talk to me a little bit about that? What exactly did you come across that says, let's plan on killing the kids?
Objection, Your Honor, misstates the testimony and its argument.
You just made reference to the fact that there are messages about the planning of killing these kids, right?
Correct.
What text messages are you referring to?
There are several text messages between Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell that refer to a plan to take the children and Chad Daybell's ability as a supposed visionary to understand when that might happen.
Okay. Okay, so there's no specific text message that talks about we're going to kill the kids and live happily ever after, is there?
I would disagree. Contextually, I think that's the meaning of those texts.
Okay, so in other words, you're interpreting those texts how you think they should be understood, right?
Well, those texts talk about the deaths, using the word death of Tylee and JJ. It talks about their death percentage, and both Tylee and JJ ended up being murdered. So if that's context, then that's the conclusion I draw, yes.
Okay, so what you're referring to are the text message where a numeric number was assigned to particular children about death percentages, correct?
Assigned by Chad Daybell, yes.
Right. Now, we talked a little earlier, and that's why I'm leading into this with you. And you could probably help me a little bit. My recollection is you were talking something about Allie Bloomer, right?
Yes, that's the second slide.
Okay. Well, it's actually the third slide, isn't it?
Oh.
Can you go to the third one? You threw me off, right?
It starts on the second slide, and then it continues to the third slide.
So you talked about the fact that because Chad Daybell put a numeric number on the children, that was the reason they were killed, right?
No, I wouldn't state it that way, that was the reason they were killed.
Okay. That supported your theory that they were killed because they were put a dark number on them, right?
I believe the dark number provided the justification for
Okay.
them to carry out those acts.
Okay. Okay, so when we go down to line 3000, would you read that one for me, the first two sentences?
Yes. Allie Bloomer is 4.1 dark. Her cop husband is 3 dark.
Okay. Now, to your knowledge, are Allie Bloomer and her husband dead?
To my knowledge, they are not.
Okay. So when you assign a number dark, explain this. I mean, you probably know better than I do. Is this something that's part of the LDS faith?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Is there a reference in the LDS faith to light and dark?
Light and dark. Yes, there's reference throughout the Bible and the LDS faith to light and dark.
So if there was pre-testimony by someone who suggested that light and dark is not part of the LDS faith, they're either mistaken or they're not being truthful. Would that be fair?
I don't think light and dark as at Daybell is part of the LDS faith.
That's not what I asked you, sir, and I appreciate you answering that way. What I asked you is that there is light and dark in the LDS faith, right?
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered.
Overruled. Okay. Light and dark in the LDS faith, right?
Yes.
Okay, so what we're talking about is that there's a numeric system here. Is that what you're telling me? That Mr. Daybell's using?
There is a numeric system that Mr. Daybell is using.
Okay. And you've never seen this with anybody else ever putting a numeric system on light and dark, correct?
I have not.
Okay. Okay. And Allie Bloomer and her cop husband are, so do you know how this dark numbering system works? Is high good or is low good, or how does that work on the dark spectrum?
From what I've been able to decipher based on my participation in the investigation, the high
people that have passed away.
That's correct.
And when you reference the James and Elena story, was that your understanding of what was being referenced at that time?
Judge calls for speculation.
Overruled.
Was that your understanding of what was
The ceilings being referred to. In the James and Elena story, or what they call proxy, meaning that genealogical had been married, they then perform that marriage ceremony in their behalf. That the two people performing the ceremony aren't getting married. They're a stand-in for people based on genealogical research who are being sealed.
And at the time
November 16th of 2018.
and at that time, was Charles Vallow still alive?
No, he was not. Or excuse me, yes, he was. I'm sorry, I was thinking of 2019.
2019. So in November of 2018, Charles Vallow was still alive.
He was.
And in November of 2018, was Tammy Daybell still alive?
She was.
And is part of the idea behind the sealing that you would be married for eternity?
Judge, leading question.
Sustain.
When we looked at those messages, if you recall, was the indication that Chad believed or was indicating he and Lori would be married eternally?
That's precisely what was stated in Chad's writing.
Through your where the teachings of light and dark originated as far as this particular group of individuals you were asked about?
They originated from Chad Daybell.
And you indicated Melanie Gibb was one of the individuals that would have received those teachings?
I believe so, yes.
You were asked some questions about levels and light and dark, and specifically in reference to Allie Bloomer. Do you recall that? Celestial relative of Chad or Lori?
Not to my knowledge.
And we talked a little bit about that, the meaning of that, and Mr. Pryor put that slide back up. You'd referenced that it is the lowest kingdom. Would that also be, would telestial refer here on earth?
Yes,
So the reference was the telestial relatives were obstacles.
correct.
Through your investigation, did you learn if Charles was ever deemed dark?
Charles Vallow?
Charles Vallow.
He was.
Did you ever learn whether Tylee Ryan was deemed dark?
She was.
Did you ever learn whether JJ Vallow was deemed dark?
He was deemed to have turned into a zombie, which
Judge, unresponsive.
Overruled.
is parallel to being dark, being inhibited by a dark entity.
And what about Tammy Daybell? Did you ever learn whether she was deemed dark?
Again, she was deemed to have been inhibited by a dark entity.
And based on your investigation and looking through these messages, who was the one that would determine if someone was light or dark?
Chad Daybell.
And of those 4 relatives that we talked about, are you aware of their current status?
All 4 are dead.
I have no further questions.
All right, thank you, Ms. Blake. I don't think we got outside the scope of cross there or direct, so won't permit recross for this witness. That will conclude the testimony of Agent Hart. Is he going to be recalled potentially by either side?
He is going to be recalled by the state, Your Honor.
And he's going to be called by the defense as well, Judge.
All right, Agent Hart, going forward, then you're still under the court's exclusionary order, which disallows you from watching this trial or discussing your testimony or anybody else's testimony before you return to testify. I'll question you about that when you retake the stand in the future. So please abide by that exclusion. The bailiff retrieve that exhibit, please. And where we took our break already this morning, we'll intend to go forward till lunch. Does the state have another witness to call at this time?
Yes, Your Honor, the state would call Sydney Woodbury Schenk.
Or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
All right, the court will note the witness has been placed under oath at this time, so I am going to inquire. This case has been live streamed and available for view by the public in general or anyone interested. So Ms. Woodbury Schenk, have you watched this trial or observed any of the trial testimony since the trial began?
No,
Okay. Have you discussed with anyone else, anyone that has testified in this case?
no.
All right. Thank you for your responses then, Mr. Wood. If you'd like to inquire on direct, you may.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Could you state your name and spell your last name for the record?
Yeah, it's Sydney Schenk, Schenk.
And
I currently reside in Arizona. Yes, in 2019, I lived in Rexburg, Idaho.
what were you doing there?
I was attending college at Brigham Young University, Idaho.
Were you working at the time?
I was not.
Were you looking for work?
Yes.
What kind of work were you looking for?
I, in the past, have nannied and babysat. I enjoy watching kids, so I went on a website called care.com, looking for a job opportunity to be a nanny. So I posted a job listing that I wanted to nanny, and she replied to my listing, and we got in contact on the website, and then later messaged through text and set up a time for me to come meet her and her son JJ.
Where did you meet her?
I met them at her townhome in Rexburg.
And do you remember approximately when you met her?
Yeah, it was September 18th.
And through that conversation, did you learn if JJ had any special needs?
Yes. So she mentioned, yeah, he has autism and that he had difficulty focusing at times and had some behavioral difficulties.
When you met with her, did she say anything about her?
Moved to Rexburg from Arizona, and that her husband recently passed away from a heart attack, and that JJ was kind of struggling to understand that.
Did she tell you anything else about JJ?
Not really that day, just, yeah, that he had autism and some difficulties.
Did she speak at all about a daughter named Tylee?
She didn't mention her name, but she did say she had a daughter that was living in town, attending college, and that sometimes she would come to visit and do long back and picked him up from the friend's house. And he seemed really upset and just sad. They had a little tiff about sharing toys or something, and he was pretty upset. And I tried to calm him down best I could, but he had some behavioral difficulties and was getting a bit aggressive and angry.
Did you have any other contact with Lori Vallow that night?
And her brother was there, and she tried to help me calm down JJ. And just in the midst of kind of him freaking out, I just left and she paid me. Yeah.
Did you have any further communications with Lori Vallow?
I did. So a couple days later, I messaged her again, hoping to work again. This, from my understanding, was going to be a longer term job that I could work for her a couple. And she said that for a month, and that after that month had passed, I could reach out to her again to reschedule another time to babysit.
And did you ever try to do that?
I did. Yeah, I called her and texted her and never got a response back. From that point on, I didn't speak with her at all.
So you never heard from her again?
No.
Did Lori Vallow ever mention the name Chad Daybell to you?
No.
So you, through your contact with her, you never heard of a Chad Daybell?
No, never.
Your Honor, that's all the questions the state has for now.
All right, Mr. Pryor, cross-examination.
It's still morning. Good morning.
Morning.
Do you have a recollection of about what time Lori Vallow returned home?
I don't know for sure, but it was around dinner times, probably around 5 or 6 at night.
Okay, you mentioned that it was about 3 or 4 hours that you watched JJ, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And then you, and this was Thursday, right?
Yes.
And then what time did you arrive to start the babysitting?
I don't know for sure, but must have been 4 hours before this. So around maybe 1 o'clock.
Okay.
I don't know for sure though.
And you mentioned that you fed JJ that day. You fed him dinner.
Yes, yeah.
Is it possible it was after dinner?
That what was after dinner?
When Lori Vallow returned?
Yes, yeah.
So you don't know about what time after dinner, though?
No, not for sure.
Okay. Okay. Now, before you started babysitting JJ that day, Lori warned you about some behavioral problems, right?
Yes, yeah.
Warned you how to distract him, do things to distract him, show him a show,
Yeah.
or keep him out preoccupied because JJ suffered from a form of autism, from what I understand, correct? Right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And when Lori left, did she leave with anybody?
Yes, she left with her brother.
Do you remember what his name was?
I believe it was Alex.
Okay. And do you know about what time they left?
I would guess around 1 o'clock. Shortly after I arrived, they left.
Okay. Okay. And they were going to pick up a friend on Thursday that day, correct?
Correct.
And do you know the name of that friend that they were going to pick up Thursday afternoon?
I did not.
Did you happen to see her when she arrived?
Yes.
Can you describe what color her hair was?
It was a long time ago.
Okay.
But from what I remember, I want to say blonde,
Okay.
but honestly, I don't remember for sure.
And a slender lady.
Yeah.
Did anybody mention the name Melanie by any chance? Okay. And you noted I read the officer's report about the interview with you. You noted that she came in and she didn't have any luggage with her.
Yeah, that's correct.
That struck you as kind of odd.
Yes. I didn't know how long she was staying. So, or maybe she left it in the car. I don't know.
Okay, you don't know.
Yeah.
But she didn't come in with the luggage, right?
No.
Okay. Okay. And you noted that there were some behavioral problems with JJ right off the beginning, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Something about going upstairs and he knocked a mirror on the bed or something.
Yes. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
He was just kind of freaking out. And when we came home from the friend's house, he kind of threw like the ottoman and a chair down. And then he ran upstairs and wanted space. And I heard something fall and it was the mirror. So I went up to check on him to make sure that he was okay. And I saw that, yeah, it was broken.
Telling me you had real problems.
Correct.
Maybe not to the extent you experienced, though, right?
Yeah.
And this was a handful of activity with JJ, right?
Correct.
Throwing a lot of things, correct?
Yes.
Misbehaving, tantrums,
Yes.
throwing things upstairs, throwing things downstairs,
Yes.
climbing up and down all over the furniture.
Yes.
And this was on the 18th, Thursday, the 18th of September, and you were alone with JJ when all of this was going on, right?
It was the 19th.
I'm sorry, the
Yeah.
19th, Thursday, the 19th.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then at that point, after you had sort of straightened things up in Lori's house, you went over to pick him up with the friend, right?
No, he was upset and throwing stuff out after the friend's house.
Okay. But before he started throwing the stuff there as well,
Correct.
talk about that with me a little bit. What kind of drama did we have while he was over at the friend's house?
From what I remember, they were just upset about a toy or sharing a toy.
Okay.
And JJ had a hard time doing that.
Okay. So when, and I'm bouncing around for a reason, so please bear with me. When the person who showed up from the airport on the 19th, the only people in the house at that point would have been the person they picked up at the airport, Alex Cox, Lori Vallow, and JJ, right?
Correct. Yes.
And at no point during that time did you ever see anybody else at the house. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. You never heard anybody mention the name Chad Daybell, did you?
No.
Okay. Now, were you aware that JJ and Tylee had a very close relationship?
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
aware.
But interestingly, you noted to the officer that when um, when Lori and her friend and Alex got home, you told Lori about, JJ's behavior.
Correct.
And to some extent, it was still going on, correct?
That's correct.
And at that point, you made note of the fact that Lori seemed to be acting in a particular way towards JJ, right?
Correct.
And you said it appeared to be a little overwhelming. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, I felt, and maybe I was judging, but I felt as if she was too comforting to him and didn't try to correct that behavior. Because to me, throwing chairs and breaking stuff isn't an appropriate behavior. And instead of correcting that, she was more just emotionally there for him and like being very sweet and kind to him, which I guess is a loving mother. But to me, that was a little strange that she wouldn't correct that inappropriate behavior.
Right. And you viewed her behavior as over nurturing.
Yeah,
She went over the top.
correct.
She was cuddling him too much.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And all of this behavior that you saw, the active behavior by JJ at that time, did that continue on while you were there? Lori was there, Alex, and this other person?
He seemed to calm down a little more once she came,
Okay.
and it improved a little.
Okay. And lastly, while you were there, the person that they picked up at the airport, when all of this behavior was going on and you were trying to explain to Lori, did the person who they picked up at the airport, did she ever use the word zombie?
No,
Did Lori Vallow at that time ever use the word zombie to describe Alex's erratic behavior?
no,
Did Alex Cox ever use the word zombie to describe JJ's erratic behavior?
no,
Did anyone in that house at the time, when JJ was acting up, use the word zombie?
no,
Did you ever hear the words from JJ using the words zombie?
no.
I have nothing else.
All right.
Nothing on redirect.
All right. That concludes the testimony of this witness then. Thank you for appearing today. Will this witness be recalled by either side?
Not by the state.
Ms. Pryor?
No, Judge. Oh,
Okay.
it's on, Judge. No.
All right. That concludes your testimony then. You may be released. Thank you for appearing today. All right. State have another witness lined up to call before we start lunch.
Yes, Your Honor, the state would call Dr. Josh Wilson.
Okay.
solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
All right. Now that the witness has been sworn and taken the stand, I am going to inquire about the court's exclusionary order. This case is being live streamed on the court's channel, and I want to inquire, have you observed any of this trial testimony before you took the stand today?
No, Judge.
Okay. Have you discussed with anyone else their testimony that's been given in this trial?
No, Judge.
Okay. Thank you for your responses. Ms. Beatty, if you'd like to inquire, you may.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Wilson, can you please state your full name and spell your last name?
David Joshua Wilson, Wilson.
And you go by Josh?
Yes.
Okay. Where are you currently employed?
Madison School District in Rexburg, Idaho.
And what is your job title there?
I'm a building principal for Kennedy Elementary.
And Kennedy Elementary School is in Rexburg, Idaho?
Yes.
Were you employed as the principal of Kennedy Elementary School in Rexburg in 2019?
Yes.
Do you recall a former student named Joshua Jackson or JJ Vallow?
Yes.
When, if you recall, did JJ enroll at Kennedy Elementary?
The beginning of September, I believe September 3rd was his first day of 2019.
Do you recall who, if anyone, accompanied JJ to enroll him in school?
Yes, his mother, Lori.
What, if anything, did his mother Lori tell you about JJ's enrollment?
That they were moving from Arizona. Her husband had just passed away from a heart attack, and that they were moving to Rexburg to be closer to family.
How long was JJ enrolled at Kennedy Elementary?
3 weeks. I believe his last day was September 21st.
And do you recall having any communication with Lori Vallow or anyone else about JJ's enrollment at Kennedy Elementary?
Yes, mom had contacted the school. We were trying to get a hold of her to finish some assessments. JJ had special needs, and so we were in the process of finishing up assessments to see how we could help him be successful at school. We were trying to get a hold of mom to finish that up, and mom had informed us that they were moving, or that JJ would be moving to Louisiana.
And just really quickly, how did she communicate that to you?
Over the phone.
Okay, so, and what else did she tell you, if anything?
During that conversation, I had indicated that once they get over to Louisiana, just have that school that they enroll into request records, and we would be happy to pass those along. She then indicated that they weren't going to enroll in public school, that they were going to homeschool, that they had a cousin with similar needs, and that they would be homeschooling. And then I informed her that we would house JJ's records there at Kennedy, and whenever they chose to enroll in public school again, whether it be back in Rexburg or somewhere else, that's where the records would be.
And at any time after that conversation, did you receive any requests for JJ Vallow's records?
No.
Okay. And Your Honor, if I may have just a moment.
Yes.
And Your Honor, I have no further questions for this witness.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Beatty. Any cross-examination, Mr. Pryor?
Refer you as principal, or how could I refer to you?
Sure, principal.
Principal?
Yep.
Okay. So principal, from what I understand, the discussion with Miss Vallow was by way of a phone conversation. Is that right?
Correct.
Did at any time was a child enrolled in the school at Kennedy Elementary?
Yes.
And did that child attend the school?
Yes.
And for how long a time did that child attend the school?
About 3 weeks.
Okay. And during that initial phone conversation with Miss Vallow, did the name Chad Daybell ever come up?
No.
Did you ever see Chad Daybell at the school picking JJ up?
No.
Did you ever have any mention of any kind whatsoever in the 3 weeks that JJ Vallow was at your school of the name Chad Daybell?
No.
I have nothing else. Thank you, Judge.
All right. Any redirect?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. That will conclude the testimony of this witness. Is the state intending to recall the witness?
No, Your Honor, he can be excused.
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thanks for testifying. You're excused from any subpoena, and you can step down. Thank you. They have another witness lined up.
Yes, Your Honor. The state would call Wynn Hill.
Thank you.
Or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Hill, now that you've been placed under oath, let me just ask you a few questions before you testify. Because this case is being broadcast and available for public view, I want to ask if you have viewed or listened in on any of the testimony in the trial up to this point.
I have not.
Okay, have you discussed with anyone else their testimony they provided?
Nope.
All right, thank you. Ms. Beatty, you can inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, could you please state your full name and then spell your last name?
Yeah. My name is Wynn Hill, Hill,
And sir, where are you employed?
at Brigham Young University, Idaho,
And where is that located?
Rexburg, Idaho.
How long have you been employed by Brigham Young University, Idaho?
Yeah, I've been there 18 years.
What is your current job title there?
I'm a therapist in the counseling center.
And prior to being a therapist in the counseling center, did you have a different job title?
I did. I was the dean of students there.
Were you the dean of students in 2019 and early 2020?
I was.
And in February, well, let me back up a little bit. As dean of students, did you have access to a student file management system?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we have a student management system. Yes.
Does that system allow you to look at it to determine who is currently enrolled?
Yes.
Does that system allow you to look at who may have been enrolled in the past?
Yes.
Does it allow you to look at who may have applied to the school and not necessarily enrolled?
Yeah. Anyone who starts an application. Yes.
Were you contacted by law enforcement in February of 2020 to do a records check on an individual named Tylee Ryan?
I was. Yes.
Did you check that individual in the student file management system?
I did. Yeah. They asked me to check the name Tylee Ryan, Tylee Vallow, and Tylee Cox, date of birth 9/24/02, and I did check that. Yes.
Were you able to determine if this individual was a current student?
Yes, they weren't. In fact, we had no record of any of those names.
Did you have any record that this individual had ever even applied to
No.
BYU, Idaho?
Nothing.
Okay. If I may have just a moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
And Your Honor, I have no further questions for this witness.
All right, thank you, Ms. Beatty. Mr. Pryor, cross-examination.
No notebook, so it's going to be short. Did you ever have an occasion to talk to Lori Vallow on the phone?
No.
Did you ever discuss an application with anybody? Alex Cox, Lori Vallow?
Nope.
Did you ever discuss an application, or did anybody in your organization discuss an application with a Tylee Ryan?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, and obviously you'd never heard the name Chad Daybell in relation to any application process for Tylee Ryan, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, nothing else, thank you.
Any redirect?
No, thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, either side intend to recall the witness?
No, Judge.
No, Your Honor.
Okay, that'll conclude your testimony then. Thank you for appearing. You're released from any subpoena, and you can go ahead and step down from the witness stand.
Your Honor, may we approach?
Yes. All right, I discussed in a sidebar with council scheduling for the day. The morning's gone more quickly than the state anticipated in terms of lining up their witnesses. We're going to take the lunch recess at this time. We will take a longer break today in order to allow for appearance of afternoon witnesses. So the lunch recess will begin and we will come back on for additional testimony at 1 o'clock. Does that work with the state
Yes, Your Honor.
defense?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, everyone. We'll be in recess until then.
All right, please.
Minute lunch. That's quite the break. I'm thinking maybe what we'll do is we'll just take a break ourselves and come back in 90 minutes with a new stream, and then can get a few things done over during the lunch break, and have a short stream for the afternoon. So without further ado, I guess we'll shut this down, and I'll have it all set up to go in 90 minutes. So see you back then, and have a great lunchtime. See you soon. Me too. I've got a Philly steak sandwich to eat, so I'm looking forward to that. Okay, see you soon.